About 7 months ago, I came to the full-time staff and I said, I really want to show some virtual reality films at our festival this year. They were all a little bit skeptical at first, needless to say, as a lot of people are when it comes to VR. But then I forced Bill Gensler, our artistic director, to come watch some VR films with me at Power of the Pixel in London in the fall. And as soon as I saw how much he loved it too, I knew that we were all going to be hooked on virtual reality, and I was going to win everyone over and make this Perspectives exhibition happen. For all of us at CIFF, our biggest passion is to help filmmakers tell their stories and then to share those stories with Cleveland. And as technology evolves, so too does the way we tell those stories. It opens doors to new perspectives, and with the exciting world of VR comes not only a way to tell stories in a different way, but also innovations in education, activism, and beyond. So why are we here today, and why has the world of virtual reality seemed to suddenly explode at film festivals, through social media, and even in the New York Times? To answer these questions, we've brought together a stellar panel of the visiting VR filmmakers we have. All their films are at the exhibition, which starts tomorrow, as well as a few local Clevelanders who are leading the movement of virtual and holographic reality in Cleveland. To introduce these panelists, I'm pleased to introduce our moderator for today, Jared Bendis. Jared is the Creative New Media Officer at Case Western Reserve University's Kelvin Smith Library. He is a specialist in photography, game design, virtual reality, interactive, and new media, and quite possibly my new best friend. Come on up, Jared.
She's just trying to borrow money. Well, welcome everybody. So this is really, really exciting for me as well because, you know, I think all of us who work in the field feel very alone all the time because you kind of work very alone all the time. So to be in a room full of talent and exciting people. So I want to go down the list. And of course, since they're not sitting in the order that's on my piece of paper, well, I'm assuming you're not Eve. Eve, thank you very much. They're so misbehaved. So Eve is bifocals. All right. Eve is the cinematographer of The Visitor and the head creative operations of Seed and Spark. So welcome. It's very interesting. We're applauding. We haven't seen any of their work, right? Because it hasn't out till tomorrow. I'm going to come out. I'm going to introduce everybody, and then I'm going to ask them very short questions. I'm going to ask them very long questions. Then I'm going to let them fight, and then we'll ask some questions as well. All right. Next, we have Jeff. Jeff, oh, here we go. Jeff. See, really, this is like we're going to sort them later. All right. Jeff Fitzimmons is one of the lead artists of Across the Line and co-founder of the VR company Custom Reality Services. Welcome. Next, we have Andrew. Thank you. Seriously, totally out of line. Andrew Goldstein is one of the lead artists of Sisters, a mobile VR ghost story, and co-founder of Otherworld Interactive. We have Kyle, who is Kyle Stanley, the senior editor and art director of Goldfarb Weber Creative Media, a visual storytelling firm based in Cleveland. And last we have Mark. That's it. That's all he gets. No, Mark Griswold, PhD, is professor in the Department of Radiology at Case Western Reserve University. He leads the Interactive Commons at Case Western, working extensively in the newly launched Microsoft HoloLens mixed reality holographic headset. Seriously. To Mark's right, we have our last panelist, the HoloLens itself. No questions for the HoloLens. So I want to start off, again, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here. And more importantly, thank you all for being in this field. What I want to start off by going is I hate the fact that right now, because we're mentioning the New York Times, everyone keeps going, virtual reality isn't this. Virtual reality isn't this. This. We keep trying to define what virtual reality isn't. So let's assume that we don't know what virtual reality is. I'm going to ask specifically, in one nice deep breath, if you could go right down the line, what your medium in this area of virtual reality is. What are we going to see tomorrow? What's the technical part of it?
Sure. So Andrew Goldstein, reminder. We do at Otherworld Interactive, we come from a games background. So we tell narrative stories using game engines. So what you see will be more of a film, but it's actually done with software.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Eve. I'm a cinematographer, and The Visitor that you'll see tomorrow is a narrative short story. just happens to be within the space of virtual reality. So it is an immersive experience as opposed to a story that should be told on a two-dimensional plane. But my background is not in very technical side of gaming or software or anything like that. It is storytelling.
So I'm Kyle Stanley. I come from Goldfarb Weber Creative Media, locally here in Cleveland, and we do documentary films and animation. So I also don't come from a gaming background, but I think we're trying to bring this into the corporate world and try to show some of the people from the high up, that this is a technology that everyone can use.
I'm Jeff Fitzimmons with Custom Reality Services, and we have been focusing on cinematic VR with CG elements, so not the game environment, fully more of a 360 video environment with CG elements in a game engine for spatial audio. But this piece that we're showing tomorrow, Across the Line, is a collaboration I co-directed with Nani De La Peña at the Emblematic Group and Brad Lichtenstein on our team, and it's a hybrid kind of a documentary. So it's documentary style, documentary footage that we shot using 360 video, and a full CG walk-around environment that is motion capture animation using documentary audio. So a unique combination for a journalistic experience.
Yeah, so I'm Mark Griswold from CASE, and I'm primarily working on, as Jared said, augmented or mixed reality, where we're bringing digital information, 3D content into your world instead of taking you into another virtual world. And we're doing this in the particular form of storytelling called teaching, but we think that this this will have application kind of across the board in what we do.
It's a fad. No, it really is. It's the nicest mix I've ever seen on a panel. So for the audience who's kind of may or may not have experience, and it definitely hasn't experienced yet, there are really different types of technologies going about. The first one is panoramic, this idea of 360 view. Show of hands, how many of your work is 360 view? All right, so that's the first thing we're looking at. When you're in your spaces, you can look wherever you want. That's the one everyone has in common. Up, down, left, right, back, forward. There is no up or down. It's just, the inner ear thing. Next, how many of your work is stereoscopic? All right, so we have a different thing here. The idea being that it's 3D. Now, they're all immersive, right? They're all immersive, just the difference that we're going to look at here, and we keep running into this issue of which is 3D, which is panoramic, and how much of yours is augmented reality. It's that little ghetto over there with the Microsoft, Augmented reality meaning, of course, that it's going to interface with the real world along the way. So now the big question. This is a question that I would ask any filmmaker, anywhere, anyone who's telling a story. There's a need to tell a story, right? So you all had that need. We knew that going in. Every filmmaker has a need to tell a story. So my question is, and raise your hand who wants to go first, why in this medium? All right, go for it.
Virtual reality is a new medium. It's not the next step of film, or at least that's not something I believe it is. And it's basically hitting the restart button onto what people know. So if you look at film, you have years and years of canon. If someone said to you, hey, can we do a jump cut? Everyone knows what that is. In virtual reality, there is no Bible. There's no one to call, to ask to do that. So you really get to play and experiment and see what works. And a lot of times you fail too, but you're the first person to fail at that specific task, and that knowledge helps a lot. So I guess I would say that virtual reality is a completely new medium.
Okay.
So maybe I'll take this one. I want to quote somebody who I really respect, Chris Milk, who's a VR filmmaker as well, and he calls virtual reality the empathy machine, because I think that things that you see in virtual reality or augmented reality have a way of providing a connection to people and topics that film simply doesn't do. Film is really powerful, and I'm, you guys are all sitting here because of the power of film. This is a whole other level. This ability to feel like you're standing in the room with another person and hearing their story as if they're in the same room as you is a completely different experience that we haven't had. It is not like watching television. It's not like sitting watching a film. I agree. It's a completely new experience that taps into, I think, our human nature in a way that anything that we've had in the past just doesn't do.
Yep.
So I agree with that, and that's to answer your question about the specific story. When we were considering across the line, we were looking at all of the different options for storytelling, and my partner Brad is actually historically a documentary filmmaker. I was experimenting with cinematic VR, and we were partnering with Planned Parenthood on a project to kind of show the experience of a woman trying to access abortion and health care in the United States and what that was like. And with the experiments that we had done in cinematic VR, we found that when you put someone in this environment, whether it's panoramic or CG or any of these immersive experiences, it takes over more of the senses that you have at your disposal, which gives you a really profound sense of being there that is different from watching a film. You can absolutely get immersed in the story of a film and the experience, but there's something about that peripheral experience where you can't turn away from it and things are happening all around you and you are choosing where to look that makes it feel more like a shared experience. And so we felt, since that was what we were trying to accomplish, it would be a natural thing for us to do it in this environment, and that's why we decided to do it. And we think, based on the feedback that we've had in our experience, that it works incredibly well. People come out of this feeling like they've had this experience that our intention was to share with them.
Can I just, who has seen anything in virtual reality in here? Show of hands, just to kind of get a sense. Okay, maybe who hasn't? So that was a lot of hands. Cool, great. I think that virtual reality and anything that you can put on your head and you become immersed in this space, you cannot unsee this. It is very impactful, and certain stories absolutely necessitate being told inside of this space. And empathy is it plays a huge role. You can't move away. You can't look away, and you take the headset off and you might want to come back. You might want to go back into that space. You might want to see it again. And I think for The Visitor, the piece that we did, it was the first virtual reality film that we tackled, and we learned so much that we would never do again, and a lot that really worked. And I think that the main focus of why we needed to tell this in a VR space was because we wanted to put you there, and we wanted to see where you were going to go and how much we could control if you look to your left or you look to your right within a narrative story. So it is live action. It is 2 actors. I remember going in and getting gear for it, and I was like, we need audio equipment. We need our mixer to have all this stuff. Why do you need audio? It's a VR. I'm like, well, there's actors. We need to put mics on them. We need a whole mixer. Like it was about a year ago, and it was still pretty new to actually understand virtual reality as a storytelling space and an empathetic space where you could not just watch something and be captured by it, but really be involved in the experience.
Yeah. So I definitely don't envy you that process of, setting up the camera and choreographing an entire scene and then having to step out in the hallway maybe and letting it run as fast as you can. Yeah, I mean, there's different challenges with 360 video as compared to creating a completely computer-generated scene. I mean, you can sort of set all of that up and you can light it, but then you really are sort of locked into that moment. With a computer-generated scene, you have artificial intelligence like you would in a video game that you have some sort of interaction with, that you have to decide when is that thing interacting, what are the cues that are going to say the next thing is going to happen and allow you to progress the story. You know, I mean, so there's things we're figuring out every day that really is, you know, we're saying, like, do you look at the thing and then that triggers the next action, the next piece of dialogue? You know, and I think those things can also happen in a 360 film where you have almost like cut points, right? And if you are able to look over to the left and then the next scene sort of blends into it. So I think it's a really interesting, you know, with Across the Line, which Jeff worked on, you know, there's that intersection between a computer-generated scene and a film. And I think that's really interesting. I'm excited to see how that plays out.
Yeah, that was we were going down a path to develop this as a 360 video experience. Nani and her group at Emblematic were going down a path to develop something similar in a CG experience. We flew out to meet with them in LA and kind of talk through what we were doing and realized from a story perspective we were going down very similar paths, and then we had a long discussion about what are the advantages of film over the advantages of CG and vice versa, right? So CG, you can create amazing environments that are photorealistic, and you could put people in there and they would not be able to tell the difference. And you can walk around, you have a lot of autonomy, you have a lot of ability to explore on your own and move around. When you introduce people into that environment, the uncanny valley comes into play, and as humans, we have things in the back of our brain that are very, very, very old that help us recognize other people. And I think that when you see video of a person versus a CG of a people, it's a different experience. And so we looked at the advantages and disadvantages and actually split out the different scenes to say, in this scene, it's really important that we empathize with or understand who this character is and get to see what she's experiencing, and video works really well for that. Then one scene was actual documentary of a protest that was going on in Illinois, so obviously that worked really well as 360. And then the CG thing was about taking real audio, but letting you walk around and experience this thing with people in your face, and that worked fantastically in CG because we couldn't shoot that. The environment would not have been controllable in that documentary style, and it was trying to accomplish something else. So I think the challenge right now for people who are working in both mediums is where is that overlap? I want cinematic that you can walk around in, and I think CG game developers and CG VR developers and producers want CG that will absolutely fool you that it's real. And so I think we're all kind of pushing towards that middle with the tools that we have now.
I kind of laugh when I hear you guys talk, because the difference between CG and true filming is so difficult, because having worked in both medium, the real world, there's always, and I always says for anyone who's thinking of getting started in this, there's always a garbage can where you weren't expecting one. Is that you've had that experience? You filmed and you're like, oh damn, and you look around and there's a garbage can, because the world is filled with garbage cans that are always behind you. And so I'm assuming that you've had this experience. You've had this experience, yes, you have. And it's very weird because you're not used to policing everything about the set, and that becomes a new thing. But what I wanted to ask, though, you can get back to that, is since you're giving a level of control over to the viewer, right? Since this is very different than traditional filmmaking, not because of this part, it's because of this part, right? The audience has a say. The viewer gets to control some of this. The viewer gets to look away. The viewer gets to look wherever they want to. And so I relate this more towards theater than anything else. So the question I would then ask is, as directors, how do you take those cues? How do you feed them? How do you make sure that someone just decides to not turn their back on the action and then turn back around? Like, how do you take the person who literally would always be looking in the wrong direction and have them go with it?
I'll just start off on the totally live action side of it, and I'm not a director, I'm the cinematographer, but I did work very closely with the director, two directors on this project. And we did a ton of research in immersive theater. And the virtual reality storytelling that we're doing is exactly like theater, but it's immersive theater where there is, I kind of divided up everything into 4 quadrants. So it's a northeast, south, and west. And we kind of took each quadrant and then decided what was happening in this quadrant and how is this choreography going to happen over here. And you know that the viewer has agency. They can look to the left or the right whenever they want. So it is about, we used a lot of audio cues, and fortunately in our space, because it was totally live action, I went to light everything, and then we absolutely couldn't light anything. The floor is water and the ceilings are mirrors. It was just a nightmare. I couldn't hide anything, even if I wanted to, and we did not have the budget to paint anything out. It was very low budget project especially for virtual reality. So we just had to use the light. But I had all of these plans ahead of time of how to use lighting to help guide where someone was looking, and a lot of audio cues, and the audio that is in ours, even though it's live action, it's positional audio, similar to gaming mechanisms. So we can trigger a noise in a background and kind of have you look at that. And the way that the actors are staged is also it isn't a documentary setup, so it's not just filming something that's around you. We did a lot of different kind of blocking to see if we wanted both of the actors ever to be in one quadrant together, or if you always had to choose who you were looking at and when you were looking and what their other action was at the same time. So it was a lot of prep, a lot of prep and storyboarding, similar to the way that you would storyboard for a regular film, but with 4 different sections in mind at the same time.
Yeah, I found during our productions that we've had to create new forms for everything. The storyboard form is like, okay, normally you have a frame and you look at what that frame it looks like, but if it's 360, we had to have like quadrant storyboards and different call sheets because there's new crew members that like, why is this person on a film shoot? But you need to have these things. And we did 2 different things. We did the documentary style, which we have obviously no control, and that was in a car, a very tight scene where anyone would have told us never to put a camera where we did just because of the parallax issues, and it proved to be challenging, but turned out to be really great in the end. A lot of work, and then we shot a comedy short that was much more that was entirely scripted, and that we actually went to theater actors because I knew that we were going to dress this room. It took place in a couples therapy session, so we put this room together. I knew I was going to be out in the hall monitoring it on a small camera, and so we worked with theater actors, and for the actors, they said it was a really fantastic experience where once we got everything going and left, there's this camera in the, wherever we set it up in the room, but now it's just the actors going through the scene. There's no crew, there's no anybody in there kind of breaking the illusion for them. So they said from an acting perspective, it was a unique experience and really powerful to just get so deep into the characters that it's only the characters in the room. So.
And that's unique just for, I know you're talking, you can keep going in a second. That's unique for actors, if they're theater or they're film, no matter what.
Right.
Because even theater actors, there's an audience there that they're playing for. This is, I love talking to actors about how this feels. There is no crew, there is no gear, you have it's usually really small cameras, sometimes now they're getting bigger, but the ones we used were really small. And it is just the most authentic version of the scene. And that's actually also what you're getting to see. So it's like a doubly wonderful experience to work in this medium and then to have the actors respond the way that they do and then get to share that moment out there in the world. I think it's really truthful.
So maybe you two could talk about the rig that you use when the camera's set up.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, we can turn this into camera tech.
I'm just not sure how many people here have seen what it looks like. I mean, it's a very different setup than the camera that we're all used to seeing over here.
Yeah, and there's a lot of specific tech that I won't get into also because someone out there probably knows more about it than me. So we actually had 2 rigs. We had the project that I did was brought together through Seed and Spark, which is a company I work for, and Bright Ideas Magazine, which is actually in all of your gift bags, and Weaver, which is a virtual reality community. And Weaver built their own proprietary GoPro rig. There are 4 GoPros, and they're vertically aligned with 8mm fisheye lenses, so they see about, I think it's either 186 or 192 field of view, so you get everything from the top to the bottom. And we had that rig, and then we had a secondary rig that was a stereoscopic 8-camera GoPro array. So we actually shot stereoscopic, but one of the camera setups, and this is way back again, very low budget. If I could have done some things differently, I would have, but no disclaimers. We ended up using the 8-camera rig and only stitching 4 of the cameras together. So the rigs are pretty small. Even the 8-camera rig was just 8 GoPros. It was maybe about this big. We needed tweezers to get the stupid micro SD cards out of that thing because it's so tiny. And, you know, it was like surgery with this. I think they're coming out with better versions of that. But the 4-camera rig, which we've now done a couple other films on, is maybe about this big in height and this big around. It's got a nice little case on it, and you know, it's pretty
Do you
small.
have the little rubber ears on it too?
We did.
Yeah.
We actually did. The what is that device called? It's
Binaural.
Binaural sound. Yeah, we recorded with that. We did not use any of that audio. It proved very bad. It was one of the things we could push aside. But yeah, it's a really weird device. It's got 4 ears. And they're actually molds of human ears in each direction. And you put it right on top of the rig, so it's supposed to be as if it's your own ears, but that didn't work out for us.
It's very creepy looking.
It's
by the
really
way.
creepy.
And
Yeah.
who else is going to volunteer what they've shot with?
We shot with a kind of ball of GoPros too. So we had one in the car. We used 8 GoPros, so 5 on the horizon, 2 up and 1 down. And then for the wider stuff we shot, I think we have a 10 GoPro rig that shoots 7 around the horizon and 2 up and 1 down. And there are new cameras coming out every other day, it seems like, and yet they're on the horizon. So I'm looking forward to better camera technology, because in addition to the tweezer issues, you have one camera overheats or something happens, and then that whole shot is blown, and then you have the synchronization issues, because GoPros are not designed to be synchronized with any kind of crystal sync or any kind of universal shutter. So you unless you shoot it right and luck out, you can run into issues where no matter what you do, they're not quite lining up with the action. So just a tremendous amount of technical headache that, fortunately, with all the new attention and development money, is changing quickly. But if people say, what are we going to shoot on? And my answer is, are we shooting next week or are we shooting in 2 months? Because those are very different answers.
Actually, I have a little funny story to share. I don't know how far this should go, but let's just consider this a safe room.
Ignore the camera.
Except for that over there. I've been on a couple different shoots with bigger rigs as well. Kodak's Action Cam has a great rig. It's got 20-some cameras in different directions, really high quality, high resolution. And the more cameras just means that you have more control over where you can stitch and what you can use and overlapping. The smaller rigs that only have 4 cameras, you have stitch lines, and everything has to be a certain distance away from the camera so that you can stitch it seamlessly and you don't have any kind of jittery problems with that. But I was on a set somewhere and someone had the head case rig on, and I don't know if you guys know this one, but there's a head case, you put it on, it's got all cameras, and it overheated on his head. And I look over and there's just like all these canned air. These guys were spraying into his head with a fan in front of him. That was, so overheating. Watch out for that.
So this isn't cutting edge at all. And now, for those who are working in CG, what engines are you working with? Are they commercial engines or are they?
We use Unity for pretty much everything. We're very consumer-faced, so we like to put things on iOS, Gear, Android, as well as do stuff for Vive, PlayStation, and Oculus. And we've just found that Unity's portable and pretty simple to kind of do that. We were able to take a Gear VR piece and get it up and running on the Vive in a few days, which doesn't happen with all the kind of software that's out there.
Sorry. No, you went on first. Go ahead.
I'm the judge here.
It isn't 2 days worth of work to put it on when you're using video, though. Unfortunately, we're using Unity. We did some work in Unreal. Neither one of them is really set up to handle video textures the size that you need for a 360 sphere. And even if we're doing straight video, we finish in the game engine because of the audio capabilities of the game engines, where you can use ambisonic audio and it generates real-time binaural. So depending on which way you're looking or moving in the environment, it gives you a realistic binaural experience. So an object that's over here, the sound will remain over there no matter where you're looking, and I feel like that's super important. But none of the game engines right now are really, it's a tremendous hack fest for us to try to get that to work currently, but hopefully that will be changing soon. But Unity is, we primarily use Unity.
So yeah, we're using Unity too. It is great for just purely CG scenes. I mean, I'm sure that they're going to help you get that video in as well. Unity and Unreal have been great to help out these VR developers that, I mean, you can just create a model on a free open source software like Blender and put it into Unity and then literally press the play button with the headset on, and you immediately have that world around you. And so we do iterations on our development. Just earlier today, we're moving little objects around, and you just press play, move it, press play again, and it's there. So I mean, these engines are really doing a great job of embracing virtual reality in the early days and making it so it's not just AAA game companies that are developing this. That startups or just small, just a kid in his basement can really do everything, and it's all free, and they're not paying $20,000, $100,000 for this, high-level software, and it's looking really good.
Yeah, I think that's really important. The Unity you can actually download and use for free. They have a personal edition, I think it's called, and they're amazing tutorials and videos. You can get up to speed and tinker with it. And Blender, which is an incredibly powerful 3D modeling tool and animation tool, that's free too, and you can find great tutorials for that. So even to get to the point where you're tinkering and making something that is a pretty amazing, simple experience is something you can do just kind of on your own now for free. And it is the same kind of tool sets that they're using for AAA game companies, Unity, Unreal. Those are kind of very high-end game engines. So it's a fantastic time to get in for free and start playing around with it and seeing what you can do.
Mark, over at CWRU, you're doing a little different though, aren't you?
Well, a little bit. So the HoloLens is based on Unity as well, and we do a lot of work based in Unity and Blender as well. I actually think that the easy availability of these engines is one of the real driving forces for this stuff. I actually wanted to go back for just a second and talk about camera technology, because this is one of the places where this difference between virtual and augmented reality really becomes obvious, I would say. So in a virtual reality camera rig, ideally that camera rig would be really, really small and collect everything going out from it in 3 dimensions. That's the ideal setup. An ideal augmented reality camera is actually something that is got, I've seen rigs with more than 200 cameras in them, all pointing in, trying to record the scene on the inside. So you have this huge camera that's looking in. And I think that this is the place where it's really obvious what the difference is. And so, for now filming, you're filming a stage for something that looks very much like theater, like what you've said. And I think this gives us an opportunity to bring that into your world again.
In a non-animated environment, the way to look at this is that if we just take it before they get to the filmmaking, right? So we all talk about like, oh, great, before there was film, there were stills, right? So the parallel here is panoramic photography. And ideally, you want the smallest point possible that sees everything with no seams. And the ideal panoramic camera is invisible. It's just a point in space. And of course, the bigger the camera is, the harder it is to stitch together. And of course, the harder it is to get to small spaces. I always say that the best way to test a panoramic camera is to shoot an elevator. You know, that idea, that's my elevator test every time. And I've shot really small planes. But what you're talking about is the other way around, is looking at objects. And the VR object world is literally trying to photographically reproduce something, and CG modeling as well. But if everyone, I want to make sure everyone's hearing this properly, it's all done with GoPros and Unity. GoPros and Unity. It's not all done with GoPros and Unity, by the way, but that's how like everyone's doing it.
So can I maybe just go off on that I was talking about? I think the reason that we're all sitting here is the fact that this stuff is now cheap and easy, and in a lot of cases free. I mean, if you've got an iPhone, you can literally grab, Google Cardboard. I've seen them for as cheap as $4 and start having fun with this. That's unbelievable, and that wasn't there just a year or more ago.
Yeah, and if you have certain Samsung phones, like this is the newer one, but some of the older versions also work. You can get one of these for $100 and clip it in there and have a really decent mobile VR experience. This doesn't require, it's not tethered to anything, and because it uses minimum specs of specific Samsung phones, the quality is much better than cardboard and is actually a really good experience, and that's really accessible.
Make sure you get some good headphones with that Gear VR.
Yes.
Well, isn't it interesting also that everyone has also brought up how important audio is? Like without audio, the video doesn't work because the spatial, the depth is so important. Now I want to go back the other way for a second, because when you go back to the roots of photography, the relationship between stereoscopy and photography. I mean, the stereoscope was invented before photography. I mean, these things have been around for a long time. We've been doing a form of virtual reality, for 100+ years. And every time it comes and it goes and it comes, and the ebb and flows of VR, as it were, or whatever we're calling VR this month, as it were, goes up and down. I think one of the last big revolutions that we've talked about, and whether you like James Cameron or not, he's the one who put the silver screens all over this country because he wants to be able to have more 3D movies. And with that came a slew of really bad 3D movies. Everybody who's getting into it with, I've got a great idea. No, I don't have a great idea. I've got a toy, but no idea. I've got an idea and no experience on how to not hurt somebody. So my question is, let's jump 5 years from now. The toys are cheap. You've proven it. You've made it ground. How do you go out and invite somebody, not from a technical standpoint, but from a storytelling and a perceptual standpoint, to go out and do good? What are those things that, like, spiritually and psychologically make this the medium for you? Uh-oh.
I'm going to start.
Go for it.
It's real quick in my head. And these are two things that I ask any director, any producer, for any kind of story that you're telling. Is why are you telling this story, and why are you telling it now? And I would add with that for virtual reality, why are you telling it in this medium? And if you can answer those three questions, why you, why now, and why VR, then I think you should go and make your film in VR. And if you got why you and you have why now, but you have no idea why it's VR, maybe it's
stay away.
Maybe it's a 2D, maybe it's a short story. I don't know. Sometimes it's a story that should be told, but it's important to know why you're telling it and why it needs to be told now.
I would add to that and kind of show my nerdy side that with great power comes great responsibility, and that because this is an emotional medium, you can do things to people that is more intense than before. I mean, things in the future could happen. I mean, you could have people get PTSD with VR from playing too many first-person shooter games. You really can affect people in a completely new way. And so you have to make sure that the content that you're creating, it doesn't affect people negatively or in a detrimental way. That comes from content producers, but it also comes from the people who own the portals. You have to make sure that the content that you are funding, supporting, and putting out there is good for people and is good quality content too. You touched on it a little bit earlier in that, we have had VR bubbles, VR kind of booms and busts. And to keep this kind of going, it's really important that there is great content and there's a lot of it, and that the poor content that is on these portals is kind of kept out to make sure that the storytellers who are doing things and doing the right things and pushing this forward have that kind of voice there. And that doesn't mean stifling people's creative visions. That means just not abusing the power of the technology right now while we're trying to figure out a lot of the rules that are there.
I agree, and that's coming from the guy that I practically wet my pants the first time I saw his thing in the middle of the night, so... He walked right up to that edge. But I totally agree with you, but I also think that there's going to have to be a certain amount of discretion. People are going to have to learn what they should watch and what they shouldn't watch. I think Eve said it, like the internet, certain things, once you've seen them, you can't unsee them. And I think that kind of extends to this, where once you experience something, you can't unexperience it. So it's important for content producers to think about that, and also people who are starting to explore it. And I think that what's different now between previous VR kind of rises is that there's a confluence of technology that wasn't there before. We're able to eliminate the latency problem, which was if you turn your head, computers weren't fast enough to render the image in your eye fast enough, and with a small lag in that, you end up getting sick. And so that was a huge barrier in the past. We seem to be at a point where we can get over that, which is exciting. And we have the internet and a networked world, and we have low-cost tools, and we have ways that we can, many people will create many terrible VR experiences, but many more people will create amazing ones. And I think with Vimeo and YouTube and all that, we've seen that, yeah, there's a higher amount of people creating music and video and these different experiences, but that just means that you have to figure out how to sort through that and find the things that are really amazing that people are creating. And I think we'll see that. And I think what I'm really excited about with the future of it is scaling education and scaling ways to train and reach people with training tools that let you experience something that is really difficult to teach in a YouTube video, or really expensive to teach in a third world country with high technology. This is going to open up all kinds of new possibilities, and I know a lot of the work you're doing is taking advantage of it, and that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, I guess that this is, I'll go back to what I started with. I think we have this huge opportunity to make a positive difference in people's lives. Education, just taking people to places where they couldn't go otherwise, and giving people experiences, again, I hope positive experiences that they wouldn't otherwise have. I think this is an opportunity in this new medium that we just haven't had before. It's going to make the news broadcast potentially much more different. It's going to make hopefully our politics much more different in the sense that people are going to be able to see the impact of their decisions much more acutely than just a photo in a newspaper. And I think this is going to change what we do. This isn't a small change that we're coming up against. This is going to change a lot of what we do in our world, and I at least am wildly excited to see what's going to happen. I think that it's going to be, again, I think we've got a lot of positive people in the world, and if they get a hold of this and do the right things, it's going to make the place a better world.
Do you all envision a place where every one of us is going to have some VR not that we don't already.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes. Maybe not everyone.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So we have a challenge, and I think that we will meet it. So Sue Workman, who's the head of ITS at CASE, has a granddaughter who is 2. And our goal is to make sure that she has a HoloLens in her backpack when she goes to kindergarten. And I think that we can do that.
I think that, your original question about 3D happened and people started making crappy 3D experiences. And I think people are still, as this is starting to get on the mainstream radar, people are looking at this as like a gimmick of, oh, that's, just another way of showing a film or another way of showing a game. And I think that's what we're seeing right now, because those are the shiny, easy to demonstrate low-hanging fruit. And I look at this more as we have zero idea of how this is going to affect us in the future. This isn't like we created color television. This is more like we created electricity. And if you had asked when we first invented electricity what electricity would be used for, there's no way you could predict computers and all of the different things that we use electricity for now. And I think this is the same thing combined with a networked computer environment. I think we're going to find out that the internet is basically a prototype for what this is going to end up being. This is the beginning of a metaverse, that I think is going to impact every part of our lives in ways we can't even begin to imagine right now.
I just want to add on to that. That as excited as I am about what VR can do, I am equally terrified. And the fact that you just said that she's 2 and you want to have something about that made me terrified, like really low in my gut. And then what Jeff was just talking about is this, I think I was actually saying this to Andy earlier, is that no matter what we create, I want to make sure that people can come out of it. You must be able to come back. And I think that there's amazing advances. And I also think we have a responsibility as filmmakers to make people feel things and to give someone an experience, an empathetic experience. And I think that we have to be very delicate in VR. And we don't know yet what's possible, but it's all changing.
So this is really where, and I agree with you 100%. I think that AR in the kid population, at least, is much better because it's something, you never leave your world. You're just adding to the world that's there. We can do VR-like experiences where we take somebody away. I agree. You have the potential to terrify people.
I'm so scared of the thought of that.
But think about it the other way. So my son's here. I won't point him out, but he has to learn. Thank you. So he's in school, in middle school, and he has to learn. The example I always give is Roman history. Right? We all learned it from 2-inch pictures in a book, and we had absolutely no connection to that. I remember some of it, but I certainly didn't feel any passion about learning that. But suddenly, if we were able to drop a centurion in front of them and have the centurion describe what their world was like, my God, that's interesting now. And so that's the kind of positive thing that I think that we could do. It's equally terrifying. He could go kill somebody. But we have this potential to do really, really positive stuff.
I feel compelled to point out for the audience, doctors do not recommend stereoscopic displays for children under 7. So regardless of augmented reality and things like that, if you've got kids, if they're under 7, you really shouldn't put them in a 3D environment just yet.
For extended amounts of time.
For extended amounts of and try putting them in for a short amount of time.
They love it. Has anyone here tried or seen the Apollo 11 VR experience? That is, to your point, I get chills in the back of my neck every time because you're sitting in this room. It's like this 70s room with paneling, and there's a TV on, and it's President Kennedy giving his famous moon speech, and then suddenly you're standing at the base of the rocket gantry, and because VR has this really amazing ability to convey scale and proportion, you could look up and you feel like you're standing on this launch pad, and then you're riding up the elevator with the astronauts, and then you're in the seat and they do the 1-minute countdown, and it's using a combination of real audio and it just blows my mind. And you get to go through the launch experience, and you look over, and the other astronauts giving you a thumbs up, and it's like, as an educational experience, like the possibilities of that, to have someone understand what it must have felt like to be stuck in this can with a window this big, and everything.
Way smaller than what you imagine. My God.
Now, I want to point out a couple. Actually, it's very funny you say that. Is years ago, somebody brought me a film to digitize. It was an 8mm film of the moon landing, but it was an 8mm film of a family watching the moon landing on a TV this big. And so there's no quality whatsoever, but the context. And that's what we're talking about with almost everything here is a sense of immersion, a sense of context. We're going to open up for questions in a second, but I want to give you guys a quote. And I gave it to Mark earlier, but it's one of my favorite quotes. And it's a rough quote, but it was talking about stereoscopic photography. And there are 3 issues. The first is the proper way of shooting it. The second is the proper way of viewing it. And the third is getting people over the fact that it's more than just a gimmick. Regretfully, those words were said by Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. in 1898. And right now, we're dealing with the same sort of thing. Every time we talk about these crazy new media, and it's the same, by the way, in some ways, new media, we still get over the idea that you have to find out how to shoot it, how to view it, and getting people over this gimmick level. And I think that, the third one's easy. You're giving us quality material, and we thank you for it. Now it turns this way, because we only got like 15 minutes left. I don't know, are there mics for them, or are we just going to repeat questions? I see a hand. We're going to go over here. We'll repeat the question, starting over here.
Can you describe the writing process, since you're basically putting the audience as the main character, or not? I mean, like, how would you go about writing a script? Given, you obviously can't approach it.
So how do you start writing something when the audience member is in the center of it, as it were?
If you read kind of like traditional film scripts, they kind of lack, I would say, some of the environmental details about what is going on. So when I talk with writers who are looking to do virtual reality experiences, I say you have to focus a little bit more on the environment and environmental storytelling, and then you also have to figure out the web of the story that you are telling. Are there multiple stories happening in this part? And if there are, should that be in 2 separate scripts, or should those go side by side? And then at the same time, figuring out the interaction that the user has with the audience is very important. You have to know, is this an interactive tool? Do things respond to the user? How does that affect the script? When we build interactive pieces, we generally start out with a skeleton script, but it's more emotional, I would say. Like, so in the haunted house piece, we said, okay, this is going to be the very big scary moment. We didn't necessarily know exactly what we were going to do there or how we were going to do that, but we had kind of an emotional buildup. And so we deal a lot more in how people should feel kind of in the moments, and then translating that into the scenes or the technology or the assets that we put in there. That way we're not kind of wedded to one specific thing if it doesn't work very well in VR when we put it in there.
How many of your works are linear? In this particular case, are linear. So how many of them are non-linear, branched? Okay, so that's a little break there, right? In terms of the process is going to be very different from linear versus non-linearity.
Right, so I mean, you have to have these brackets that build out from every interaction. There's a if-then. I mean, if the person touches that thing, then there's something that happens from it. But if it doesn't happen, you have to decide, do we make it happen anyway? Because we want them to know that part of the story? Do we try to tell the story in another way,
I was just going to add that the ones that I have done, because they're all live action and they have actors that have like A, B, and C lines to actually say, we have done everything from, and we're still trying to figure out the best version of this, but what has worked the best so far is a regular script, looks identical to a film that you would shoot for this kind of screen. However, they're overlapping. So there might be like 4 lines on the page where again, what Jeff was talking about, we do everything based on quadrants. So there's a script for the north quadrant, and we do it for cardinal directions because that's what we like. So we have a script for like quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4, northeast, south, and west, and sometimes they overlap and sometimes they don't. But it's really basic. And then as a DP, I come in and then we evolve the space. So that's actually what my job is with the production designer, and that stuff isn't written on a script anyway. It's just a bigger space to work in.
All right, you were next, sir? Okay, so the question was, the question was, does it wear off over time? Does the emotional, the exciting effect wear off over time? And the second question was, do you have any advice on how to be evil? Or that's how I'm paraphrasing it. So just answer the first one.
I think it's just going to get better over time. I think that, it's kind of like, does being a human being and being able to see things in stereo and wander around the world get boring? Well, it depends where you are. And I think that is the content part of this is that the tools are just getting better and better, which means that we can take over more of your sensory experience, and that will just enhance it. But no, I in my experience, even watching things over and over again, every new thing I try or every new experience is just mind-blowing in a different way.
I've seen one thing over and over again over the last year and spaced out in time, and every time it's like I'm seeing it again for the first time. Just wildly engaging.
I would say that I don't think the level of immersion will decrease, and the reason is because I think how we view virtual reality. I think people, when they try these experiences, they're more like a memory than they are anything else. It's in terms of you could go in and try one of our pieces and you could probably have a conversation after about how tall the ceilings were, or things that you saw that gave you depth perception. I think your brain recognizes that as a space, and that kind of triggers that immersion light switch in there. So I don't think it's going away, and I think as technology improves, we'll even get better at it too. I mean, we're running this stuff off of phones. I mean, can you imagine that 5-10 years ago? And technology gets so much better so quickly. So even the stuff that we're doing now, the technology will help that.
Yeah, I mean, it does not get boring, especially when something's happening right in front of you and it feels like it is a scene that is actually in front of you. You have a great point about it being a memory. It feels like a memory that's in a real location. I mean, there's social experiences where you're actually talking with people around the world and doing trivia. And I think I recalled a moment with somebody in the office where I was like, was that you that I was talking to that about? It's like, no, it was somebody from the Sudan. And we were talking about baseball, right? Well, it terrifies you, but I mean, my God, the educational benefits of being able to meet with people around the world, and seeing the new, new perspectives. And so, right, I mean, I think that maybe 360 film actually has a bigger challenge because unless the technology really becomes higher, resolution, part of the problem is that you don't get that leaning. A lot of the really important experiences have this positional tracking where you lean into something without even thinking about it, and you get that different perspectives again. And I think that there's new technology that's allowing for that. Near light field, if anybody's familiar with that. I'm not even going to try to go into it. But that'll allow you to sort of capture a bit of a range with the photography. But I think it's sort of, you were worried too that the content has to have a meaning. You can't just inundate people with anything that's 360. You have to have some very strong experiences.
Yeah. And I think that the same way that we still go to the movies and we're still listening to stories and we're still reading books, we're still going to keep watching things in virtual reality if the story is there, if the feeling is there, if the empathy is there. And yes, as much as it scares me that sometimes I watch movies and I'm like, yeah, I did that thing. I'm like, no, I did not do that. I watched that somewhere. There's always that overlap with how impressive it is into us.
Can we transition to evil now?
No. Actually, you can, because we're about to wrap this baby up. So first we need, so if you'd like to learn all about evil, you can capture him later. He's offering an evil workshop. So first of all, I want to thank our panel once again. Big round of applause for them. In the round, and 3D. You have to come and see their work. There's no way to actually, let me rephrase that. You have to come and experience their work. And if it inspires you to go out and see more, great. If it inspires you to go out and do more, don't be evil. And I think that's our panel. So again, thank you very much for coming.